Hey everyone, Jared here from Story Towns, and in this edition, because we're all in lockdown, we are doing a winery series, so you know about the wineries around the region. These podcasts are brought to you by the Food and Fibre Council. Just want to point that out. Jane Young, call out to her. And in this podcast, we're talking to Dot and Tam at Herrmann's Winery just outside of Hamilton. These ladies are a cack.
Guys, who's going to tell me what goes on here? How did this happen? Where do we start?
Okay.
Tamara, you're starting.
Thank you. Here, just in terms of the winery itself, this was built in 2010 or so, and we've been making Herrmann Wines here since that time. The vineyard itself was planted in around 2005, and Dot might talk a bit more about the history of all of that. But we sit here in a lovely part of Western Victoria, just on the outskirts of Dunkled, we're open as a cellar door, and been making wine for a long time, probably 20 years or so, and seen things come and go, and interesting experience.
I've seen you guys. You're very passionate about wine, which is great. That's why we're here. So let's go back. Let's go back to the history. Dot, give us the history. Run us through it. Give us the quick overhaul.
Okay, well, we planted the vineyard in 2005. There's 6 different clones planted, so we get quite a diverse wine coming out of that. Our first vintage was, as Tam said, 2010.
Can you define vintage for me? Because I was a bit lost with what vintage is, if one of you want to define that for me.
Year of harvest.
Thank you. That was easy. Go on, Dot.
Yeah, all the technical terms.
Tam, you have a passion for wine. Tell me, how did this come about? When did it come? Were you 3-4 years old? You been drinking wine, you thought this is great, I'm going to keep doing it. How did this go?
Not at all. Like most Australian kids growing up in the late 50s and 60s, my orientation to wine was a bottle of Matus Rosé at Christmas time. That was the one with the round base that you stuck a candle in the top, mostly after the wine had been drunk, but sometimes even beforehand. So, I had very little family or personal exposure to wine. And then I did what a lot of kids do and did in the 80s from the countryside. We went down and moved to Melbourne for work, and of course, the big city for a country kid is an explosion of culture, food, and in this instance it included wine. And so that became an interest. I subsequently returned to live in the countryside and own some small properties, and Western Victoria is terrific broadacre farming, but limited resources or whatever usually mean that you can only buy a small amount of space. So what better to plant than a vineyard? So no experience or anything like that. Just it's one of those those great life decisions of it seemed like a good idea at the time. The intention was to sell fruit, but that all just seemed far too complicated and contracts and whatever, so for some mad reason it seemed like another good idea was to make some wine, and so it was probably about 22 years or so ago now. I've had about 20 years of making wine and growing grapes, and more recent times I've been spending a lot more time with Dot and Brent and Holly and their kids, and it's a real privilege to hang with thoughtful, decent human beings to hopefully enable us to pull together a decent and charming and approachable and accessible kind of wine. So hopefully the wine mirrors the people that produce it.
Wow, and I think that's very true, actually. I think you've nailed on the head there. I can see it's almost like a family environment here. Like, this is what you guys feel like. And Tam, you were saying before, you all get together, you get the grapes, and then you go and you kind of all make together. So you're making everything on site here, yeah?
Yes, absolutely. So all fruit comes here into the winery. It's dealt with here in terms of production. There's no artificial additives. It's a wild yeasted, wild fermented wines. Those things they're fashionable nowadays, but they're just a nice way of doing things as far as I'm concerned, as opposed to being simply fashionable. And all of the byproducts, skins, seeds, the lees that fall out from the wineries, all goes to compost, and that in turn gets spread around on trees and on garden and the like.
Because you were saying before, and I thought it was a really nice thought you said, because you're a smaller winery, you're able to recycle and compost, where if you had some large extreme, the wineries, say in South Australia, I guess there's a lot left over that can't be regenerated on the land there, but you make a real you've got pigs.
Yes, we've got pigs, and they get to enjoy some of the products as well. I like some skins and stuff. Try not to give them too many fermented skins, because they're funny enough as they are without having too much alcohol, and maybe that's against the law, I don't know. But I think really the principle that sits behind all of that is about being able to produce a product that is credible and worthwhile, doesn't generate waste that impacts, the land or the broader world in an unhelpful or unhealthy way. And I think that kind of approach is something that in this day and age of big business and big enterprises, that notion of being small and integrated and self-reliant is an interesting way to live.
And so, Dot, I guess with you, so you've been growing. You've had a vineyard before. You have vineyards away from here and this one here. I'm trying to put all the pieces of the puzzle together, so bring this piece of the puzzle to me.
Well, the vineyard initially was near Tarrington, and that's where the grapes come from at the moment. There are some vines here as well which we're establishing, but the property here is now part of the bigger picture as such, so we have now purchased this property as well.
Have you got a love for wine? Where's your passion arrive from, or how did you fall into this one?
It was probably more to do with my late husband than myself. It was his passion, his dream.
You had a midlife crisis, that we were saying, yeah?
Yes, I think that the vineyard was instead of a motorbike, apparently. But it was something that he just always had that passion for, and along with the partnership with Tamara, I suppose it was his dream, his passion and her knowledge. And so we've all worked together right from the beginning, and that's got us to where we are today.
I can see the partnership, it's flourishing. Tam, you had a great analogy before. Can you repeat that somehow with men and vines? I'm going to let you take this one. I thought it was great. So this is I'll let you take it away.
Okay. I think the discussion was about in the context of perennial versus annual crops, and a peculiarity of grapevines is that, as far as I can see anyway, they mirror really the experience that we as people might have, in so much that we're planted, we're small and tiny, and we don't even know ourselves. We then grow into a childhood that can be a bit of a nuisance or bothersome. We then get to be adolescents, and adolescent vines are as mischievous as adolescent people can be. They make up their own minds and they'll do their own stuff, and can be a bit wayward. Kind of love them, but nonetheless they're not yet who they could or should be. Then, if you're lucky, they survive to an adulthood where they start to produce regularly and reasonably. Not yet reach their potential, but they're doing okay, and you can start to see where they're headed. Then they kind of hit their midlife. So a 45-year-old vine is a beautiful thing, in much the same way that perhaps a 45-year-old person is. They know a little bit, they've learned a little bit, they're working hard and doing good things. Then the vine, like the person, gets a little bit smarter when they get old. They don't produce quite as much, but it's usually of excellent quality. It's measured and reasonable. They they've put their roots well down into the earth. They've seen lots of summers and winters of life, and they kind of know stuff. And they make the very best of fruit when they're a vine. And I think with people have sometimes it's when they might be at their most sage. So that's my vine people analogy.
If that's all we have on the podcast, I think that's perfect. And there's something else that you entertained me with before, was you notice when you go to different events with different types of wines, you have different types of people. Can you talk me through that? Because I thought that was great, and I wonder if people would agree with me. Go.
Yeah. I didn't think we were going to be talking about wine politics here, but we'll just go for broke then. And I think my comparison was between Pinot Noir and Shiraz growers and winemakers, and I mentioned that you go to a Pinot Noir conference and all the flower people are there, and everyone's beautiful, and mostly they don't eat enough, and half of them are vegans, and all the men are wearing red trousers and yellow t-shirts, and kind of flicking their hair around a bit, which is just a bit too long and a bit too dirty. Yeah. So that's the Pinot Noir crowd, and the conference gets to talk about all manner of crazy stuff, So our place in the world, and the interconnectedness of vines and wine and cosmos and beauty and love and peace and that kind of stuff. So that's Pinot Noir people are like the conference. And then I think we mentioned that you go to. I only went to one because mostly I grow Pinot Noir. So I've got this sort of schizoid experience. I don't quite know where I belong because I made some Shiraz as well. But you go to the Shiraz conference, and the Shiraz conference, and people are like the Shiraz wine. They're very useful, very helpful, pretty easy to make, agreeable, good fun, but not very much depth very often, and so you don't quite know who you are. And the men folk there are big and burly, and they've all got hairy backs, so they just don't get on with the Pinot Noir people. So I can't ever imagine in Australia having a Pinot Noir and a Shiraz conference, or it could be World War III, I think.
I love it. You've just it's beautifully painted, beautiful. And Dot, tell me about the experience when people come in, and when they come off the road, they make an appointment to come in. Tell me about the experience they have here.
Well, tasting the wine, of course. But just the general beauty of the area as well fits very well with the wine tasting, I think. The lovely red gums and mountains in the background, and the pigs that you can go and visit, just everything in general, is relaxed and good fun.
Well, thanks for talking to me today, Tam. Appreciate that.
Yeah, our pleasure. No problem at all.
Dot's gone off to have a cough, but thanks for talking to me, Dot.
Lovely. It's been great. Thank you.
You guys have got it.
So there goes Dot having a coughing fit. Thank you, Dot and Tam. And I'm Jared from Storytowns. You can follow us on Facebook or Instagram, Storytowns. Just search for us and we'll let you know when the new podcasts are up. And I'll talk to you on the next podcast. Thanks, everyone.